it's Carly, and welcome to this episode of the I Learned podcast. Not super sure what we're going to talk about other than this concept of noticing. I had a whole profound moment yesterday of noticing, and then again today of noticing. And what I'm talking about is what I personally think is the closest experience to spiritual growth that we can ever practically have. So, it's easy to talk about spiritual growth and the evolution of our soul, and these are lofty intellectual concepts at best that we can have a more abstract conversation about what it all means, but what does it actually look like when it plays out in your life? I think it plays out as noticing. So go with me. I got a couple examples. You see what you think. Would love to hear from you. So yesterday, let's start with that one, because that one was wow, I journaled several pages about just how I couldn't believe what I was noticing. I mean, I can believe it because it's happening, but wow, I was blown away by what I was noticing in that moment. And what it was I was noticing an absence of guilt, where I hadn't even noticed up until yesterday, where it's been a while. It's been a few weeks at least of I don't have that underlying sense of guilt that has basically been with me my whole entire life. And I wrote this out in detail, this part about even when there's nothing to feel guilty about, I'm there's still this sense when you are going on a trip and you have this feeling I know I forgot something, I'm sure I did, but I can't remember what it was, and okay, so I'm just gonna go because I can't remember what it is that I'm forgetting, but I know it's something, and that feeling that doesn't really have a specific thing to it. It's just this general underlying gnawing feeling of course there is something, and with time I'm sure I'll think of what it is. So in the meantime, I'm just gonna worry that I forgot the thing, or I'm just gonna feel guilty. And plenty of times it seems there's usually something going on in my life where I feel guilty in some kind of a situation. For example, I don't go visit my grandma often enough, or, I'm not doing enough for this thing or this person, or whatever it is that I've judged myself, and now I'm the guilty party in the situation. It seems for the most part, most of my life has just kind of gone from one of those experiences where I'll feel guilty about that particular thing for a couple days, and then the next time it's something different. And it just seems there's always something, and in the rare instance where there's not something that I specifically feel guilty about, there's still this underlying current of, oh, but I'm sure there's something that's going to come up where of course I'm guilty of something at some point. And it just gave me this moment of pause and literal compassion, and just wanting to love myself and honor myself, and really acknowledge the underlying pain of carrying that much guilt. And I don't feel sorry for myself by any means. I think guilt is a really powerful teacher, just like any other emotion that we spend a lot of time with. It can teach us a lot of things about ourselves. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, whatever. I spent my whole life with it. And then yesterday noticed that it's been a few weeks. It's been a few weeks since I noticed that gnawing feeling of guilt. Not that I'm saying I don't have it anymore, it's gone for good, but it subsided for a significant chunk of time. I can't tell you exactly when it subsided, but it's been a while. In the noticing of it yesterday, I just kind of noticed how peaceful I felt and have felt for a while. The peace has just kind of been getting more and more and more. And if you follow my astrology and coffee stuff on my YouTube channel, we have the ingress of Mercury into Taurus, and that was kind of a slowdown of our mind. And the sun is entering Taurus here in a little while, a couple days, and that'll be an additional slowdown. So, like, we have these energies in the sky, as above, so below. Like, we have these energies that are supporting additional peace, like new levels of inner peace that maybe we haven't touched before. So that's definitely on schedule, but it's more than that because there's transits through Taurus all the time. And like I have had this undercurrent of guilt my whole life. As a Virgo South Node, I do think it's a lot wrapped up in that where I do feel bad, or I did like back, before 3 weeks ago, let's say, or like before the guilt subsided, like there was just always this sense that like I wasn't perfect enough, I'm not doing good enough in my life at anything, like really everything that I did, I could have done better. And that coin, there's two sides of it. There's the guilt side of I should have done better, or there's the other side of look at all of these different ideas I have for ways I can improve. How exciting that I can get better and better and better and better. So like that's all that same coin. It's just how you want to look at it. And it is interesting as I did journal into this, noticing like at first that's really all I had was like I have this peaceful space inside of me, and I was just really like mellow and enjoying this peaceful space inside of me when all of a sudden it hit me like, didn't guilt used to live here? Like, wasn't all of this full of guilt before? And like, wait, when did guilt move out? Like, I don't even remember having that conversation. Like, it's like so many things in spirituality along your spiritual path. Like, I didn't get into what I'm doing to heal my guilt or like get that undercurrent of guilt to go away. I never specifically set out with that goal of doing that. And yet, the natural path that unfolded, the one foot in front of the other, following, my own path of least resistance, my path of most ease, path of most fun, all of that, the steps that I've taken have naturally allowed that guilt to subside. And as I really went into the noticing and went into both the peace that's now here and the guilt that used to live there, and kind of just looking at the contrast between the two and how nice it is that the guilt has like, I don't know if it moved out for good or if it's like, on an extended vacay and it's going to come back at some point. I don't know about that, but like I'm enjoying this absence of it at the moment. But going back to the, I think this is spiritual growth piece is like, as far as spiritual growth, what does that even mean? I personally define it as feeling better and better and better and better inside of yourself, inside of your life, your perspective of the world and the unfolding of the events of the world, that your perspective your perspective is elevating a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. So it's not necessarily, just like the being able to see what wasn't quite perfect in a situation, that classic Virgo energy, being able to sense imperfections and opportunities for improvement, that there are two sides to that coin. You can either look at it and beat up on yourself for not being perfect, or you can take it and be inspired to do better next time and incorporate your lessons learned and try again and learn again and try again and learn again. And that process can feed itself eternally, or you can beat up on yourself and feel bad about it. And it's like, what is spiritual growth? It's getting to the other side of the coin. It's coming up out of the guilt of not being good enough and moving to the side of acknowledging that you're doing the best that you can in any given moment and that you really do a lot in the grand scheme of things. Could you do more? Probably, maybe. Does it matter? No, because it's, Pisces North Node, classic Pisces North Node, Pisces Mars. Like, I go with the flow. I do what I can. I give what I can when I feel inspired to give, and I do give a lot in the grand scheme of my overall life. I have given a lot, and could it have been more? Maybe, maybe not, because you never know if pushing harder in one moment is actually taking away energy from something that's supposed to be coming right around the corner in the future. Like the world of shoulds. Should I have been more? Should I have given more? That really like is tied to this concept of guilt, and that awareness of how I could have been better, using it to hang a guilt trip over my head was kind of my status quo for the first, 30 some years of my life. And now noticing yesterday that that guilt isn't there, and instead it's replaced, at least for the time being, with more inner peace. And as I really dove into it, I noticed like trying to feel for the sense of like how long has it been that the guilt has been subsided, and just trying to get a sense of like what's changed, or maybe what were the transits around that time, or astrology wise, like just trying to get a feel for what could be the underlying reason that this guilt has gone, because like I said, I haven't ever specifically set out to tackle it. And as I sensed for the time of it, I got to I think it's been at least a few weeks since it's really been subsided. So it's probably been a gradual decline even before that. And it was about 2 months ago that I stepped into meditation in a whole new way, thanks to a conversation that I had with a friend of mine named Tony. And his relationship with meditation, talking to him about it and his experience journeying internally through his emotions and letting all of that come up and holding that space for himself and being with what comes up and working through the layers of it and releasing emotions and moving energy, and him talking about his whole experience. Basically, like, it wasn't that I necessarily like was dying to meditate. I was dying to have that experience of what he was talking about with like being there for yourself, like creating that space for yourself to like honor whatever comes up, the same as if you encountered someone you loved and they had a bad day, like you would sit with them and you would listen to whatever they were ready to share, whatever they wanted to talk about. You would take it, you would allow them to share whatever was coming up. And so often with ourselves, we're more like, you know, the master on the stagecoach, like whipping the horses, trying to drive ourselves in a particular direction according to the agenda that we've already set, rather than allowing whatever is going to naturally bubble up from our subconscious, from our deeper self, from our higher self, however you want to think about it. The things that get shown to us in meditation, like they have a place in the unfolding of our spiritual path. And I've always thought, or been more of the belief set that like I have a really busy mind and meditation's too hard and I get distracted and I'll get a good idea and then I want to jump out of meditation and go make a video or do the thing or whatever it is that I got the idea for. And that I just, meditation's boring or it's not fun or whatever. And it's like every one of those adjectives, this is my own personal opinion, but every one of those adjectives that I would call meditation, it's a little bit like I'm calling it to myself. Like sitting with myself is boring. Like I think myself is boring, or like it's not worthwhile. Again, like meditation, like I don't have time for that. Like I'm saying I don't have time for me. I don't have time to listen to me, to what's real and alive to me. And listening to Tony describe the intentionality behind the same as, I mean, any healer is likely familiar with this idea of holding space for those that you're working with. And I very much am. And I try my best to make sure my frequency is in as good a spot as it can be, just so that I can hold that frequency in space for whatever person I'm working with in that moment. And I've even used the saying, I've told lots of people, and I've advocated a lot for using our magic on ourselves and using our spiritual gifts on ourselves, and turning those things inward and pointing our light at ourselves. And I do that to a lot, like to a big extent, like in my journal. I feel like that's part of that. But just sitting in the quiet, being with myself, carving out that space, letting whatever is real and alive bubble up, and letting myself sit there with it, being curious and allowing it to unfold in its own time, the same that I wouldn't rush my dear friend or my lover as they were trying to express something that was difficult for them. I wouldn't jump to interrupt or jump to tell them what it means or jump to provide answers. I would be curious and I would stand back and I would allow them to find their way in their own time. I would try my best to do that anyway. It's always a practice, it's always a work in progress, but yeah, why wouldn't we host that same open space, open allowing space for ourselves? So that conversation with Tony a couple months ago, it shifted something in me drastically as far as how I viewed meditation, like what even is meditation, because so often I think it's like quieting your mind, and my mind is so active, and that's fucking impossible, and I get really frustrated, and so I just don't do it, and I'm like, whatever. And now I don't really think about meditation as quieting my mind. I think about it as I'm being with myself. I'm trying to not necessarily quiet my mind, but detach from the thinker and be the observer and watch what's going on inside of my mind and what are the things that are coming up. Like, if I am frustrated, what am I frustrated with, and what's underneath that frustration? Because frustration is just a more mild form of anger, and anger mostly bubbles out of fear. So, what's really going on? If I feel a little frustrated, let me close my eyes and like really be with that. And yes, feel the frustration, but feel a little bit deeper into the frustration. Where's this coming from? Let me be with myself. Let me allow myself this space to express and to let the pieces unfold. And that shift in how I view meditation is now it's a way of being with myself and allowing this time for myself to express whatever's in there, whatever's ready to come up. That as soon as I got off that Zoom with Tony, I sat for meditation most of that afternoon outside in the sun, eyes open, eyes closed, kind of back and forth. And I had lots of thoughts. I had lots of realizations. I had lots of, I heard nature sounds or saw a deer or whatever, and like had, realizations. And so it wasn't a quieted mind experience necessarily, but it was like spending time with a friend, allowing me to simply be with myself and whatever was there. And it was not a boring experience at all. So I haven't had like a strict meditation practice these last couple months by any means, where I'm like, I've heard people do like, okay, it's 5 a.m. and I'm going to do this for 30 days or 100 days or whatever. And I'm like, nope, not that hardcore. But almost every day, more or less out of the joy of doing it, I've carved out that space of silence where even if it's like I'm driving to town and that's 10 minutes, I don't play any sound, and then it's just me and my thoughts or me and my mind. And again, I'm trying to become that observer detached from the thinker and really see what's behind the thoughts or what's the emotion underpinning the thoughts or whatever that case is. Or if it's the shower and that's 20 minutes of no sound where normally I would play music or a YouTube video for myself or something. So it's sometimes like that. Sometimes it's taking a walk outside for 10 or 15 minutes with no sound or no music or no podcast or anything like that. Again, just allowing whatever's ready to float into my mind to be there and to be the observer and try to watch what is the bigger package of what's being revealed to me here, not just the knee-jerk reaction and response to like for example, sometimes I'll get an inspiration when I'm in meditation, which is great. That's kind of what you hope for, is to be able to, get out of the running on the hamster wheel long enough to have that moment of divine inspiration come in. And like historically, I'll take that inspiration, pop out a meditation, and then run with it. And now, instead, I'll actually stay in meditation with the realization and try to go deeper, try to get underneath the realization. What's behind it? What's the more? What's the yes and this? And as I go, I mean, there's always, always, which is just so fucking exciting. Always there's something under there. There's more. That if you don't just take what you got in that first instant and run with it, if you really sit with the first piece, the second piece will come. And if you sit with the second piece, the third piece will come. And that part has really never been open to me before, where as you sit with each piece, the next piece will blossom off of it. And I feel like I've really only ever gone into meditation and like gotten one piece at a time instead of like waiting for a whole picture to reveal itself. And so anyways, that's like a huge tangent and digression that a couple months ago I started this relationship with myself, this new level of the relationship with myself, because I've been engaged in daily self-care for a while, but not really like this. This is definitely more intimate. There is not that third party of music or background noise of any kind to distract me or keep me from experiencing as fully as possible what's inside of me. So that feels like a new layer of becoming intimately familiar with myself. And I take the long way through this story because the day after I had that conversation with him, it was on a Monday. The next day, I remember, was 2/22/22, and it was my first sacred circle on my Patreon community where I was holding an interactive Zoom for those from my YouTube channel who were interested in taking the conversation to that more interactive level. And it was in the introduction of welcoming everyone into this space for the first time that what I said was, I've been waiting for this for a long time. Or that's the thought that came that wanted to be expressed. And in the middle of trying to express that, the depth of what actually that means, like that piece of I've been waiting for this for a long time, that's so surface level. And the depth behind it, what I mean by that is like every moment I've felt like an outsider, every moment that I've felt like nobody understands me, every moment that I've felt like I don't have any friends, every moment that I've felt like maybe I'm just going to be a lone wolf for the rest of my life, every moment that I have felt lonely and alone and like who even cares if I exist? Like who would even notice if I wasn't here anymore? When I say I've been waiting for this for a long time, I'm 33 years old sitting in front of like a group of maybe six or seven, all women, surprisingly enough, because that was, I had to tell them later on in the Zoom, like, it's so funny that you're all women sitting here because historically I've told the story that like I don't really get along with women. I mostly get along with men. Like women typically don't like me. And then here I am in this like hosting my first like interactive community event and they're all women. And it challenged, like, even just that piece, like, challenged this old story that I've been telling about who I am and what my life is and who I am on this planet to other people and everything else. And the depth, like, allowing for the depth behind what's coming on the surface. That door had only been opened the day before, and the outpouring of emotion. I mean, I got so emotional in the middle of trying to say, I've been waiting for this for a long time, because it was like the tears, the emotion of every moment of pain I've ever felt in my loneliness came through as tears in that moment. And you can imagine, like, it was pretty freaking powerful. For those of you in the Patreon community, you probably saw it. And it was honestly really beautiful because it set the tone of what this space is. This is where we allow emotions to come out. We don't stuff our emotions because, oh my gosh, crying makes people uncomfortable. Fuck that. Fuck that. This is what's authentic. And this is what is like coming through me in this moment, is this depth of basically relief that like every ounce of all of that loneliness that I've experienced in my 3 decades on this planet was like trying to melt its way out of me in that moment of gratitude for, I've been waiting for this for so long. And that was such a beautiful moment. And that was 2/22/22. And as soon as I got off that Zoom, so we were on there for maybe 2.5 hours, as soon as that was the only time I cried, was like there in the first few minutes, and it was a big cry. It took me several moments to like pull my shit together, which is fine. Um, but then it didn't really tear up the whole rest of the time. And as soon as we got off that Zoom, I just lost it. I like melted, and it was tears of joy. It was every ounce of that loneliness melting out of my system, every ounce of ever feeling like I'm broken and an alien and I don't belong here and all of that. I felt like this experience had wiped all of that clean. And that energy was still inside of me, so to transmute it and to transform it and to release it, the tears had to flow. And I cried and cried and cried. It was probably a solid 15 minutes of like bawling with these tears of joy at that chapter of loneliness and isolation. Like, at least for the time being, it had come to a close. And I was moving into this new territory where I was finding connections, like real heartfelt spiritual connections with people on this planet, women even. Like, how unexpected. It was so freaking beautiful. And again, I take the long way through that story to say that since 2/22/22, the day after I started having this new relationship with meditation, I have cried almost every single day. For the first like 45 days, I did cry like every single day. Maybe I missed 2 or 3 days in the first 45. So many tears, so many tears. Sad tears, happy tears, angry tears, disgusted tears, fucking pissed off tears, joyful tears, angel tears, trauma tears. Like, it was all the tears, all the tears. And then since then, like since the everyday crying affair that I had for like 6 weeks, where I'm so glad I'm at home pretty much full time, where I don't know how I would have been in public, because it was like the bouts of crying would just like burst out of nowhere. Like one particular thought or one particular thing that somebody said would instantly erupt with like just like that very first one, where it wasn't just this surface piece of I've been waiting for this for so long. It's like, really consider the depth of what that means. And it was the full experience all in one moment, like a lifetime of experience of waiting for this, or like this pain or this longing or this anger or this injustice or whatever it is, and crying the full power of that energy all at once. And since those first 6 weeks, I still cry probably 3 or 4 times a week. And all of this to say that before these last couple months, I haven't cried on the regular since my 20s, early 20s even. And those tears were always depressed, poor, pitiful me, victim mentality. Like, why is this happening to me? My life is so hard. Like, those were the tears that I cried, which at that point, like, I think, you're just like almost aggravating the situation, like by wallowing in it. Like, I don't think you're really releasing anything so much as like amplifying that vibration, is my own personal experience back from that time in my life. Versus these tears feel like I am moving energy out of my being. Like, the actual physical tears, the wetness that comes out of my eyes, yes, but also the way that your breathing changes while you're crying, the way that it tenses the muscles in your abdomen while you're crying, that soaks up energy. It transforms the energy into like your physical muscles are now using it and consuming that energy, converting it through your metabolism. The I was gonna say something else. Oh, the sounds, the sounds, all the sounds, the yelling, the or whatever sound you're making. That's probably really good on the podcast. It comes through loud and clear. Um, but yeah, like every ounce of everything your body is doing while those tears are flowing, it is transforming that energy, a lifetime, maybe past lifetimes worth of energy, and releasing it and clearing out that space in your energetic grid. So for the last couple months, like, I've known that this has been happening, that these energies are being released, and I feel more open and less heavy, and like there's less weight on my shoulders, and all of these things. I've been identifying that for weeks and weeks now. I mean, that piece has been clear, but it's been so general, like I've been releasing this energy. I mean, I didn't really know what that energy was until yesterday, when I notice it's been a few weeks since I've felt guilt, since I've had one of those moments where I'm like, oh shit, I should have, like, I mean, I know everybody knows what I'm talking about, where like, I don't visit my grandma often enough, or like I should go by my work and like offer to help this person because they really like, whatever it is, where we kind of beat up on ourselves for not being enough. And yesterday I noticed, like, it's been a few weeks since I've taken that stand with myself. And in the journaling of the noticing, I put two and two together. I think it makes sense to me that, all these tears that have been flowing these last couple months, all this energy that's been released, I'm thinking part of that energy was guilt. Part of that energy was the self-destructive pattern of constantly thinking that I'm not enough. That pattern that has been so deeply ingrained my whole entire life, that I mean, I manifested parents who reinforced it. I've manifested bosses who've reinforced it for me, partners who have reinforced it for me. Like everything in my life has reinforced to me almost constantly that I'm not good enough. And for the last few weeks, I have been. Spiritual growth. And like, when did the spiritual growth happen? It happens like a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, like 1 millimeter. Every tear that falls is another millimeter of spiritual growth. And like, while it's happening, it feels so minute. It feels so little. You're just crying. You're just bawling your eyes out. You're wallowing all around, like, whatever it is. And it's not until a few weeks go by where those millimeters have added up into inches and those inches added up into feet. And now I'm a solid 10, 20, 30 feet away from where I was. Whoa, I'm in a different place. I'm in new territory. Noticing the new territory, the difference between where I am now and where I used to be regularly, consistently, noticing that I'm somewhere different. It's like the difference between, trying to get somewhere different and noticing that you are somewhere different. It's a very subtle distinction maybe, but I think it's a hugely profound one because like I said, I never set out to tackle my guilt and make it go away. And honestly, I think kind of like the pity parties I used to throw in my 20s back when I used to cry all the time before was like, that is beating the drum of what you don't want. That is aggravating the situation of what you don't want and wallowing around in how powerless and ineffectual you are to change it. And that is very different from realizing that, I'm crying because I'm happy because I'm so grateful for where I am right now. And I'm grateful for where I am in that, like that very first like dam that broke was like, I'm grateful that here I am sitting in a literal community of here we have 6 or 7 individuals from literally across the globe come together at this one place and time over Zoom. Yes, but still to create a community because there is such resonance between us that we have this communal energy, even if just for these couple hours that we get to participate in it, we have it. And that was a new manifestation that I had not manifested up until that point in my life. And it broke that dam and let so much that was pent up in there come out. It took 6 weeks to cry those tears. And I'm still crying multiple times a week and letting that pent up energy come out and letting it flow. And looking at it from this angle, I truly do believe that so much of those tears and that crying and releasing that energy and allowing it to move instead of holding it inside of me has yielded this outcome of this kind of letting the air out of the balloon of guilt. Like every little bit of energy I released was that guilt balloon getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And like I said, like now there's this newfound capacity, newfound bandwidth of inner peace. And as I stand firmly in this inner peace and it feels so freaking amazing, it's only then that I notice like, wait, didn't guilt used to live here? So yeah, it's been such a fun process of noticing that gap between where I am right now, because I can feel where I am right now compared to how I used to feel on a regular basis. So I share the long-winded version of that. And now let me see if I can remember the second example, because it was this morning. Nope, it's really not coming to me. So I think that's pretty good as far as like, I think you guys get what I mean about the noticing and how that really to me is the most practical form of spiritual growth that we ever get to see or witness in our personal lives, is to notice when we have created enough of a gap between who we used to be and who we are now that we can actually notice the difference. So maybe this allows you to do some of that in your own past with your past self compared to who you are now. Even if you have to travel back 10, 20, 30 years ago, I mean, most likely you are a better version of yourself now than you were then. And as much as we can notice those kinds of things where we feel better now than we used to, we can prove to ourselves that we are headed in the right direction. And if we know we're headed in the right direction, hopefully that can breed a little bit more acceptance and compassion towards ourselves while we make this journey of continuing through the ongoing challenges and contrast and all that stuff, all that yummy stuff that like the physical reality offers and is never going to ease up on. But sometimes, it can be like we can get sucked back into our old patterns, even for just a moment, even enough to be able to like kind of wake up inside of our old patterns and be like, wait, no, it's been so long since I had that knee-jerk reaction to something. And it's actually, I'm glad I did, because now I can see, wow, like it's been a really long time since I felt this way. And feeling this way right now is just proving to me that it's been a long time since I felt this way. So, in that noticing of what's different, even without really intending to create these changes are happening. They are being created through the daily rituals that we invest in with ourselves, through the daily self-care, through any self-care, really, any spiritual reflection, introspection, any of that we engage in is creating these little microscopic changes that over time they add up into something that's big enough to witness with the human eye, with the human consciousness. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I know I sure did. I needed it. I didn't know what this was going to be, but my golly, as soon as I started talking, like it flowed right out, didn't it? So that's always helpful. This podcast has been like, I can't even tell you how abundant it feels to have this outlet in my life, to know that when I feel inspired to share, like in the past where I've put that wanting to be social and wanting to talk and chat and tell my stories and all of that, like I've put this limit around it, like I need a friend or I need a group of friends or a group of people to gather with me, and then they'll listen to me talk and they'll ask me questions and I'll get to share and blah blah blah. And like that obviously is a very taking energy to take into a relationship, is like, I want to be here with you because I want you to listen to me. And I'm definitely guilty of treating friends like that in the past. And the more I've enjoyed this podcast and knowing that like anytime I feel like talking, I can talk. I don't require another person to be held hostage in front of me in order to engage my own social behavior. And that for me has been really life-changing in terms of unlocking, like, just I think feeling less lonely, feeling less isolated, feeling less understood and seen. Like basically, like I can understand myself. I can see myself. I can share whatever feels alive to share on these podcast episodes. And then they exist basically outside of time, where anybody can come along at any time and join in on this particular conversation when that's where, the universe has led them in that specific time. So if that's you, if you've made it to this point and this was the conversation that like you just needed to hear, perfect place, perfect time, I thank you so much for being the receiver to this message that I felt the need to share, even without even knowing what it was all going to be about. But I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad you were here to take it in whatever time that unfolded for you. And until next time, dear friends, you take such good care of yourselves. Hopefully notice the progress that you make as you look back over time a little ways. And so will I.